Hi everyone, my name is Charlie and today I would like to share my top 10 books of 2025. As always, these books might not have been published in 2025, it's just when I read them. And for the first time, I am going to be ranking them, going from 10 all the way down to 1, because to me this year there were a few clear favourites. I can't really say if there's any correlation between any of the books. It feels like there is a lot more fantasy in my top 10 this year. It also feels like I have a lot more bigger books than usual. We're talking books that are more than 500 pages. It feels like 2025 was definitely the year of the tome, the hefty book. Maybe that's the reason I read fewer books in 2025. I feel like I was spending more time with characters, but I also know that there are a couple of books here that are rather short and I read in one sitting. Let's go with the book that's coming in at number 10, The Devils by Joe Abercrombie. And this was a birthday gift. And it's also a book that I didn't actually intend to ask for. I was looking at books that I wanted because, if you didn't know, every year my good friend Charlie of Charlie Book Reads asks me for a list of books that I would like for my birthday. She then distributes that book among my family so I won't know what I'm getting. When I opened this, I remembered it wasn't Joe Abercrombie I'd been thinking of. It was Joe Hill. I ended up really enjoying this book. It is a tale of an almost alternative, fantastical version of a medieval world. These people are being kept below, like, the Pope for being monsters. And they are tasked with heading out, a bit like the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, to place our protagonist upon a throne. Ain't gonna lie, saw the final twist coming from the beginning, but I enjoyed it. It was just the sort of fantastical romp that I enjoy. It had action, it had adventure, it wasn't afraid to get grim and dark. There was humour here, the relationships between the characters were such that I really enjoyed seeing how they were formed and how certain characters got on with each other. I really look forward to seeing how the series continues, and I'm glad to have finally read Joe Abercrombie because he is a writer of fantasy fiction I have been meaning to read for a very long time and have avoided because I've been worried about the grimmer aspects of his books. And I do look forward to seeing where the story is going to take us based on the ending of this one. I can't say that I was the fondest of the ending, but it also left me wanting to see where the story was going to go and whether it would turn my opinion around. So that's why it's here, and that's why it's in number 10. The next book felt like it should be included on my top 10, given the fact that I read this book, very much enjoyed it. Then one of my volunteers has read this book and then gone on to finish the series before I even started the second book. Indeed, I gave her my second copy of the second book and she borrowed the third book before getting the final two elsewhere. And that is The Light Years by Elizabeth Jane Howard, which is the first book in the Cazalet Chronicles. I read this back in summer. I very much, again, enjoyed my time with it. It was a book that I've been wanting to read for a while, but I've been avoiding because I hadn't read everything by Elizabeth Taylor and I hadn't read everything by Barbara Pym, and I was thinking that I need to read them all and then have a new 20th century female writer to obsess over. Well, I just threw that all out of the window this year and just decided to read what I wanted to read when I wanted to read it. That's how I got to read The Light Years, which is about the Cazalets, or Cazalets, however we say it, and follows them throughout a summer in 1938 as war is coming, and you get to hear what these characters are thinking given they've already lived through one war, and how they are as a family. It felt very much like a soap opera, very much like a drama you'd sit down to watch on a Sunday evening. Similar to The Devils, really, not in terms of like all these people are fighting some sort of demonic force, but in terms of seeing how characters interact with each other and having this rather large cast and all the ways that they're intertwined with one another. Now, of course, they're a family, so you've already got that aspect there. But just because they're family doesn't mean that they necessarily have to get on. Given that there are 5 books in this series, it does leave you thinking, well, where are they going to go from here? And you can see the younger female characters where they might be growing to. And I've already started the second book and we're seeing some inklings of that already. One of the reasons it made it to the list is because I got to having this discussion with my volunteer about this book. And it was amazing how many scenes were still so prevalent in my mind, even though she'd read it 4 months after me. And I was just able to say what had happened, and we were talking about these characters, and I was like, I didn't realise I'd remembered it so well and so vividly. Elizabeth Jane Howard just writes incredibly good, compulsive, thick books. And then we move on to a shorter book that I read in one sitting, and that is Wildfire at Midnight by Mary Stewart. This cover does not do the book justice. This cover makes it look like you're getting this light, romantic read. Mary Stewart was seen as like the queen of romantic suspense fiction. And I read her first book and I found it a bit outrageous, almost on a Mills and Boon standard, but I could see why people enjoyed it back in the day. Wildfire at Midnight is dark, it's gothic, it sees our character Gianetta head on up to the Isle of Skye to avoid London because everybody's getting ready for the coronation and she doesn't want to get stuck in flaming summer in the middle of London with all these tourists there. But when she gets to the Isle of Skye, she finds that young women are being murdered, supposedly in some sort of ceremonial way. It was the fact that it's always foggy and the weather really lent to the atmosphere within the tale. Her ex-husband shows up and I could see where that was going, and it was a little bit annoying with the ending of this, but I also have to give the writer credit because she was writing at a time when that would have been the ending that people wanted. It was the definition of a page turner because I just sat there, got it read and couldn't believe how fast I got through, but it was one of those where once you finished a chapter you had to read another chapter. It's first person narration, so you spend the entire time in the character's head, and because of that I hated her husband so vehemently that I could not believe the murderer could be anybody else. I thought it could be one person because of something that happened, and I was like, but this man really just, he's awful. He's an awful person. And so even though I could see clear signs of who the actual killer was, and I should have said spoilers there, I was like, nope, it's got to be this person because we despise him so much. I was there for Gianetta. I've gone out and purchased so much more Mary Stewart based on how much I like this book, so let's hope the other books are on a par. We then have a book that I don't own and that I borrowed from the library and that I'm really surprised I'm including on here, given that many years ago I said that if I never read the works of this writer again, I would be happy, and that is 3 Days in June by Antonia. I have found, as I've got older, that I appreciate the stories I didn't like when I was younger. When I was younger, I didn't like books that were about the mundane and about the everyday. I wondered why. What is so good about them? And now, I really like seeing it captured. If you can give me a book that captures the mundane in a compelling fashion, I am going to like that much more than many other things, and that is what Antonia has done with 3 Days in June. It's exactly what it says on the tin. We're following our protagonist, and her daughter is getting married over the weekend. She's just lost her job. Similar to Wildfire at Midnight, she has an ex-husband on her doorstep, and we just follow her for those 3 days, and seemingly inconsequential things, similar to Deborah Levy's Living Memoirs trilogy. An inconsequential thing will lead into her thinking about something from her past that had her making a specific decision. And this book, despite being decidedly mundane and showing the everyday things that go on in a person's life, is filled with a sense of shame and guilt and grief. And I really, really enjoyed it. There's not more than I can say than that. I went to this book having read Redhead by the Side of the Road, and I just felt like 3 Days in June was the one that I had preferred over that one. Both of them were doing things where people were living very simple, comfortable lives. And then something came in to disrupt that. And in terms of one book, you're looking at it where the protagonist wishes to return to the comfortable and the same and the mundane, and one of them's wondering whether they ought to try and move away from that. And it was interesting to pair these books with one another. And similar to Mary Stewart, I have now gone out and bought more Anne Tyler based on my reading of 3 Days in June. As I say, 8 years ago I wouldn't be doing that. And similar, another thing though, with the volunteer who's also reading the Cazalet Chronicles, she is the one who told me to go and read Anne Tyler, because Anne Tyler is one of her favourite writers. So we're getting somewhere. We're getting into a trajectory of finding the great female writers. I'm just thrilled by that, and I really am looking forward to reading more Anne Tyler. The next book was also from the library, and that is Murder at Gull's Nest by Jess Kidd. Jess Kidd is a favourite author of mine, so I'm very glad to have read this one. It seems to be the first in a series, hopefully, of cosy crime novels from this author, with the nun Nora Breen. And in the first book, Nora is wondering what's happened to a friend of hers, and fellow nun went to visit this town many months ago and has disappeared, and Nora is certain that something suspicious has happened. So she goes to the town to find out just what that thing that happened is, and the investigation starts from there. She might have discovered some small town corruption. She might be investigating a murder. What made this book so compelling for me is Jess Kidd's writing. It's the characters that she creates. It's the setting that she evokes. Like, you're aware that this book is set at some point in history, but she doesn't out and out tell you where it is. The reader is left to use the clues that she is giving you to figure that out yourself. Murder at Gull's Nest is a phenomenal start to a series, but all of the Jess Kidd's writing that I've read in the past I have thoroughly enjoyed and has made it onto favourites lists, so I was not surprised by this one. And then we have another book that didn't surprise me, which is the Whisperwicks, The Impossible Trials by Jordan Lees. The first book was on my favourites last year, the second book is on my favourites this year, and hopefully the third book will make it onto my favourites of 2026. This is an amazing, phenomenal, fantastic middle grade series full of adventure, suspense and magic. I get touches of Oz when I read this, and I say that because of the darkness. It is so incredibly imaginative. And in this book, we have children being kidnapped and having these masks put on their faces that make them forget who they are. And the protagonist, Benjamin, returns to the world because he is struggling to cope in the real world, having discovered his connection to the Riedenwald. This is a thoroughly exceptional sequel in that it connects to the first book, but can also stand on its own. It amps up the terror that we felt in the first book, and you're getting to see the way that the Viper's control of the world is getting worse. And it's great to see Benjamin grow as a character. We get to see more characters in here. We get to see friends returning from the first book. This book didn't necessarily feel as suffused with grief as the first book, but there's definitely still a sadness there that Benjamin is working throughout the entirety of the book, and we get to learn about the importance of friendship with this one, which I think is a fantastic thing with children's fiction. Honestly, still maintain that if you have middle grade readers in your life, you should be getting them onto these books because they are just positively great. And then we have The Raven Scholar by Antonia Hodgson. See what I mean about the heft. We very much went in for the heft in 2025. The Raven Scholar is one that I wanted to read, having heard so much about it on BookTube, and it was characterised to me as a murder mystery novel set in a fantasy world, and that is one of the reasons that I wanted to read it. But this book is so much more than that, in that really the mystery is solved within the first 300 pages, but then we've got to deal with the fallout from that, perhaps the political fallout from that. You're getting to see this tournament that's happening, which will decide who the new emperor is going to be, and all these different factions coming to fight it out and figure out who that's going to be as well. And it was a great read. All of these books, what I'm really enjoying is the way that characters interact with one another, getting a full idea of the world, and also prose that is engaging and a different take on something. Here our narrator is a murder of crows, not a murder of ravens really, and you learn about the history of the world, how all of these different gods might have imbued certain people with magic, the paths that people can go down. We are introduced to a character and follow them for a certain amount of time, and then a great betrayal happens, which really triggers the events of the rest of the novel and the way that our protagonists for the rest of the novel are then perceived. I could foresee a twist happening, but when it happened, it didn't happen in the way that I thought it was going to, which I was thrilled by. For a thick book, I read it rather quickly. I took it away to Whitby with me, and I didn't get the chance to read it there. So when I got home that weekend, I just sat down and just powered through the entire thing in 2 days. It is utterly compelling, and I understood the plaudits that it received from people. I enjoyed it so much, I asked for a copy for Christmas. And then we have another book that I borrowed from the library based on the recommendation of Ben over at Ben Reads Good. That book is Mother Naked, and I believe the author is Glen James Brown. I could go and check because based on my enjoyment of this book, I went out and purchased Ironopolis by this author. In Mother Naked, we are getting a performance, a monologue from Mother Naked, who's telling us about a curse that ran through this family in a nearby town. And was it the devil? What was it? What caused people to turn on this family? It's all told as a storytelling aspect. You're aware that you are basically the audience. You're getting to see a record of this show that happened, and that's one of the things that intrigued me about this book. How would it work? I always like to see writers try and take on something different and see the other ways that we can craft a story. And in here, you're aware that you're getting asides from the audience, but you just have to go with what Mother Naked is saying because you aren't getting to see what the other characters are saying to our narrator. I hated everything that happened, but completely understood why it happened. It told the story in a fashion as this is exactly what would have happened at this time if these characters committed the acts in the way they did. And it taught me a lot about a time period that I hadn't previously known about. Awful, really. And really made me understand the phrase, eat the rich. Goodness me. With such a strong character voice and a tale of, can we say, betrayal and revenge? I don't know, I don't want to spoil it, but I really think a lot of people should read this. And I am looking forward to reading Ironopolis, especially because I've heard that one of the ways that the author has written in this is similar to a way that I wanted to try something. Basically, there was a prompt on one of these writing websites to write a story or write a poem as though you were somebody telling this story down the pub. I feel like anyone could do it. This author could. And now we're at our top two. And my top two has really been the same since October. It's not changed. I wondered whether books might come in and change it. For me, the book that's in at number 2 is a shock because I didn't think that this book would be going anywhere near my top 10 this year, but that is Barnaby Rudge by Charles Dickens, because I felt like this book has been much maligned by readers in the past. But then I learned what this book was about. I learned that there was a tale of a past murder here. There is. And there's crime and there's deception, and it's decidedly grim. We have family again. We have the interactions between people and how their motives might scupper things for other people. We have heft. We have people who fall in love who aren't allowed to fall in love. It's a classic Dickensian drama with some of the most beautiful prose. Like, I have an entire vlog about it, which I will leave a link to in the description. It was one of my reads for Victober. I'd said I was going to read Little Dorrit, and I read this instead because this was just calling to me. I did not expect to enjoy it as much as I did enjoy it. This book goes into the No Popery riots and was Dickens' historical novel. One of them. When the riots are happening and you're seeing buildings being destroyed, some of which have been the cornerstones for the narrative, the meeting places for our characters throughout the book, and they felt as much a part of the story as the people. They felt as much a character as the people. When they're being torn apart, it's awful and it's horrible, but the prose is just so magnificent and so beautiful and written with a poet's eye that I couldn't help but enjoy the reading and would go back and reread those passages. I, included them in the vlog of it as well. It's a book that I've continued to think about, and think about the fact that I hadn't expected to enjoy this book as much as I did, and I hadn't expected to be taking this book everywhere with me and wanting to read it every spare opportunity and be telling everybody that I was meeting just what I was reading and saying to them, you might not like it, a lot of people don't really get on with this one, but I'm thoroughly enjoying it. Wholeheartedly shocked me in how good it was, how magnificent a tale. And maybe that is something that I can say has been a link through all of my books this year that I have called favourites, is they've had large casts of characters. And indeed, in the top one, our number one spot, my favourite book of 2025, it's been a great big family and seeing how they work. And that is The Little Friend by Donna Tartt, another tale that is suffused with grief, for it's following a family after the young boy, the son of the family, was murdered 12 years before the events of the book. We are following the character of Harriet. Harriet reads boys' books. She's in the, I can't remember whether she's in 60s or 70s Southern America. There is racism in this book. There are incredibly racist characters doing horrible things. It also felt very Dickensian. So having this next to Barnaby Rudge, it just feels perfect, really. I said it felt Dickensian at the time because of the grotesque characters that Donna Tartt had created, and this world she'd created that feels so memorable and feels so true to life. You know with Donna Tartt that you're going to get a complete story. She's going to go to her very best to try and tie up every single loose end. And the way that this story works is that Harriet's getting away with everything she gets away with and doing everything that she does with the innocence of a child, and that seems very fitting for the story that's being told. She's decided that she's going to put herself in harm's way because she must solve her brother's murder, because there's this belief that if she solves her brother's murder, then maybe her mother will be happy again. Maybe her mother won't spend all of her time in bed. Maybe her sister won't spend every single moment that she can find sleeping, because it's almost as though they've done that, like almost trying to do a Sleeping Beauty type thing of like they'll go to bed and the world will just close in on itself and they won't have to think about it anymore. You know that their father's elsewhere and just sends money back every month. She's got her grandmother and her grandmother's sisters, and you have the car salesman who's a bit of a nightmare really, but he's one of the grimmest, greatest characters I've ever read. You have these brothers who, one of them's trying to better himself, but is he going to get the chance to, because his grandmother's telling him that no man in their family has ever made something of themselves. Is delightful in its depiction of people and how horrible we can be to those that we love because we feel like we can get away with it because they're close to us. What are they going to do? They can't leave. One of those that felt really utterly honest, and my friend Joy had said that this was her favourite out of Donna Tartt's books, and now I've read all three. I think I agree with her. I very much enjoyed my time with this one, even if it became a tough read at times. And there were some dream sequences in here and I've not been a fan of dream sequences in the past, but the way they were going and what they were telling us about the characters, very much enjoyed. So yeah, The Little Friend is my top book that I read in 2025. I really had a great reading year. Even though I read fewer books in 2025 than I've read in previous years, I did reread Emotionally Weird quite a lot, and I think I prioritised rereading books if I wanted to reread them, and also prioritised putting books aside if I wasn't enjoying them. I think back to February when I spent 4 weeks reading one book that I wasn't enjoying because I wanted to see what the hype was about, and it ruined my reading for a few weeks because it had been so annoying and frustrating that I didn't want to read anything that would do that. Then after that I was like, just put them aside. If you're not enjoying them, DNF them. I threw out reading goals this year, and that's something that Charlie and I will talk about on our podcast. It's a Charlie thing in the coming weeks, so either head on over to the YouTube channel or wherever podcasts can be found, we should be there, and you will hear about reading goals and perhaps the decisions we're making around them this year. But I'm looking forward to perhaps finding some new favourites in 2026, continuing my want and my discovery of 20th century female authors, and maybe actually reading some more modern books. But part of me also wants to get some rereads in there. However, we will see. If you've read any of these books or would like to talk about them, please feel free to do so. What books have made it onto your favourites lists of 2025? Feel free to let me know in the comments. I hope that you have enjoyed this video, because until next time, that is all.